Hey friend, welcome back to Fig and Farm at Home. I am so glad that you're spending a little bit of time with us today as we continue on our journey of our summer savings series. If you're just tuning in here and you're wondering, is this a financial podcast? No, it's not. But we are all on a mission to create homes that we absolutely love and doing it on a budget so that we are not breaking the bank. We're not borrowing from our kiddos' college savings account. We're not overspending. We're not taking out credit cards. We are doing it honorably and we are doing it on a budget and stylistically too. That is the goal here. So if you missed it, in episodes number 257 and 258, we talked all about thrifting, how when you understand your design aesthetic, you can make thrifting really efficient. The tips I use when I go, and how you can find the good stuff. Last week, we listened to my friend Alyssa, who has a knack for using and sourcing on Facebook Marketplace. And today, we're going to talk a little bit more about Facebook Marketplace, but on the flip side. Like maybe you're the seller. Maybe you want to strategize and resell a little bit in order to make ends meet. The guest I have today is someone I've been following on Instagram for a while. Her name is Elaine, and she is known as the Curb Vulture on Instagram. And as the name implies, she has a knack for finding really great finds on the side of the road. But she doesn't just have a knack for finding things on the side of the road. She's made a wonderful business out of it. So let me introduce you to our guest, Elaine. She is a homeschooling mom of 7. Furniture flipper by day and Mrs. Austin on the pageantry circuit by night. She started flipping furniture as a way to pay back debt, fighting against waste, and finding beauty in the left behind. Her philanthropy carries over into her world of pageantry, where she shares her message of hope after overcoming childhood sexual abuse, bulimia, and even a heroin addiction. To say that Elaine is inspiring is an understatement. I hope that you are inspired by today's conversation. We grew up with the phrase, home is where the heart is, but our culture has shifted and now the message is, home should be Pinterest perfect. I'm calling BS on that message. Home, it's not about the stuff, it's about the story. And whether you know it or not, your home is a reflection of you and is already saying something. So what is it that you want it to say? Hey, I'm Dani, a former first grade teacher turned home decorator. Going from a dual income to a single income so I could stay home with my babies meant budget, like ramen eating, Goodwill shopping budget. And I learned a few things along the way, like how to bring big style to your home without breaking the bank. And I'm sharing it all with you. Tips, tricks, decor, and design advice so you can learn to tell your story with your style, where you can start living free from the Pinterest perfect trap and start living a life of intention. Welcome to Fig and Farm at Home, where we design happy living and where it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Hi, Elaine. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I introduced you to all of my guests before we pressed record. And I have been following you on Instagram for a while, and wow, you are a busy mama, but you are so inspiring. Your story is so inspiring. And as I'm doing this summer saving series to inspire my moms to be able to create beautiful homes on a budget, you kind of are the queen of budget, and you do some pretty amazing things with the finds you have on the curb.
Yeah.
Before I spill all the beans, I want to have you tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got the name Curb Vulture.
So my name is Elaine Mingus, and I am a proud, happy mom of 7 children. Me and my husband have been married for 21 years, and my oldest is 20 and my youngest is 6. So like you said, I'm super busy just doing that. We homeschool our children. And we, as you talked about making a home on a budget, that is exactly what started my entire journey. I was at home, I was blogging at the time, and we were broke. We were on food stamps, we were on Medicaid and WIC and all the government assistant things. And I was so sick of being broke. But I'm looking at Pinterest, there's all these I had decorated my home pre-Pinterest. It was all dark and moody, kind of what's getting back into style now. But when I was looking at Pinterest, everything was light and beautiful and airy, and I didn't have that. And I thought, well, my goodness, like I'm so sick of living in this like kind of like, you know, outdated house, but I don't have the money to do it. How am I going to do that? So I just started selling my stuff on Facebook Marketplace. And at the same time, we decided my husband was making just a little bit enough that I was like, hey, why don't we go on a vacation? And he was like, sure. So of course, you know, we decide let's not go to just like camping like we normally do. Let's go to Hawaii because no one has flown and we've never done a big vacation because we've just constantly been pregnant, nursing, for 14 years, probably nursing and pregnant.
Yeah.
And I we planned the trip as frugally as possible, but we came back to $10,000 worth of debt and an empty house with no furniture. And I was like, I don't, what am I doing with my life? And so I was very, very distraught and was laying in my bed and I was crying and I was listening to Lauren Daigle's Rescue on Me repeat. And the lyrics of it say, you know, you're going to come out and find me in the middle of the night. You're going to find me and you're going to rescue me. And I just said, Lord, I absolutely need rescuing. Like I got myself into this mess, but I need you to help me get out of it. And that was the extent of my prayer and dried my tears and went to go do some sort of errand. And I saw this piece of furniture on the side of the road. And I thought, well, I don't really need that. And trash truck is minutes from coming and picking this up and putting it in the landfill forever. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to kind of clean it up and I'm going to sell it on Facebook Marketplace, 40 bucks, like really, really cheap. And that just, it just became almost an addiction. You kind of feel like a pirate, you're hunting
Yeah.
and like a vulture. So that's why I grabbed the handlebars of my steering wheel. And I just was in a, you know, when you're all by yourself and you get kind of in a mood and it's, you know, really probably too late to be driving around looking for furniture. And I just said, I'm a vulture of the curbs. I'm a curb vulture. And that's how it started. And I thought, you know, after a while, I thought, oh, that's such a like negative term. Maybe I should change my name. But everybody loved it so much that I just kept it. And so we, you know, kind of lather, rinse, repeat, did that a whole bunch of times, kept picking up stuff, and it didn't matter if it was furniture, because I, you know, focus on vintage furniture now, but it was doll houses, igloo containers. You know, I would stack up, you know, 20 or, you know, sorry, 4 or 5, you know, igloo coolers and sell it for 20 bucks. And somebody, you know, they didn't care if it leaked. They just wanted it to put some ice in their fish and their beer in it on
Yeah.
their boat. And so they would come and get all 4 of them. It could have been a dollhouse. It could have been lamps. Like it was just a host of things.
Yeah.
And we just did that for 6 months straight and paid off $10,000 worth of debt. And in the
Wow.
meantime, my kids also got to their pick of all the toys I picked up off the side of the road and the little tiny trampolines you pick up. And then I got the pick of home decor. So it helped me kind of get into that place where I was able to furnish my own house for essentially free.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so inspiring. Oh my goodness. And so how often would you find or do you find things on the side of the road, literally on the curb?
On the curb. It was, you know, I don't want to not give credit where credit is due because I really believe that this was a like something that was meant for me. I felt like God had really anointed me to do it, as silly as it sounds, because I had been blogging for 10 years trying to make a difference in the world. And it just it I mean, I had 50,000 followers. I mean, I did good, but it never made money.
Yeah.
And so I just finally cut that out. And, you know, I would go out every night and it felt like things were handed to me on a silver platter. In fact, my friends, I would teach them how to do it, and they would say, "Man, I've been out with you, and I've seen you do it, and it just doesn't feel the same. Like it's like the doors open wide for me." And little did I know that it was perfectly situating me for the pandemic. But
Oh,
I would go out every night probably, and sometimes I'd go out like I'd make 4 car trips full, and I'd bring it home. My husband had a Kia Sportage at the time, and so I used that because I called it generic car number 1127 because it was like every other car that would stroll through the neighborhood. I had during that time a 15-passenger van, which I now call the serial killer van because it does not look like a van you want creeping slowly at night,
no.
stopping every once in a while in your neighborhood. So I stopped taking that van out because
Sure.
I it was just a little too creepy.
Yeah.
So I'd have to make multiple trips back home and just set it in my driveway and pray it didn't rain, you know, while I got in the and until I got it the night before stuffed into the house. And I just used my house, like my living room was full of furniture and things were upended and the kids were running around and I kept yelling at them, don't touch it. I've sold it. I've sold it. So it was a crazy time for sure. But I went out probably every night at least, or every other night.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. And I think too, there are different parts of the country, because we're both in the US, that do that. I remember living in Iowa, and there's like there's like a turnover day with apartments and things, and wow, you can get some really good stuff when you go out. I don't know if that's like that where you are, but
Yeah.
here you might find things every once in a while, but not as pervasive as.
So I'm in the suburb of Austin, Texas, and we don't have bulk pickup days. In Austin, I believe they have bulk pickup days. Well, they will literally pick up anything like dryers and couches in bulk. And Leander, everybody just kind of puts stuff on the curb whenever they feel like getting rid of it.
Yeah,
And so it wasn't like, oh, I had to go out on certain days. I figured out the trash schedule. First, I started with my neighborhood because I know the trash schedule of my neighborhood and I just go
right.
around and I kind of inch out a little further, like, oh, there's still trash cans out. There's still trash cans out. And then I would see the trash cans out were on this one day for this neighborhood. So I'd go hit that neighborhood. And so that's kind of more how it was. And I know that I do have a friend that does really well on Instagram. She goes and finds stuff on bulk trash day in Austin. I just haven't had the need to go outside of my little 20-mile radius.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's so awesome. Okay, so tell us, so you are a mom of seven. You do this on the side. I know that you have a podcast as well, right? And are like I'm gonna say beauty queen, that's not the right word, but you are in the pageant world. So you are so busy. So tell us, what does a day in the life of Elaine look like? Just any day, but if it can include some of the Curve Vulture stuff.
Yeah. So Vulture, we started doing full time in 2022. And my husband, I was able to retire. I hate the term retire my husband to come home and help me with the kids at home. But it was more so creating a family legacy and a business that we could do together as a family. Because I've always dreamed of our family, being a kind of a family that works together. And so, and we, were able to clear 105,000 that first year. And so, the day in the life then was way more like intense than it is today. And there's a few reasons for that. But I would go out to different, places that were a little bit further to hit up some of the thrift stores over there because I kind of pivoted to vintage furniture because I found a storage unit that was full of vintage furniture for $50. And I realized really quick, I found it on Facebook Marketplace. And I realized really quickly the draw of vintage furniture to people that was the niche that was really popular that at the time it still is. And something that I already loved because I grew up with my grandmother's mid-century home and loved all the little peg legs. And as a farmer's granddaughter, I grew up also with stories of her family being a family of 8 and they had to make do because they were Depression era farmers. And, my mom would straighten out bent nails. So it was kind of a waste not, want not, which is very much in line with my family. Like we have 7 kids, like nothing is going to waste over here. And so so I started doing, really focusing on vintage and that's how I built my business. But fast forward now, as I've introduced pageantry, which the financial freedom of my business has allowed me to adopt pageantry into my lifestyle. And I do that because that's really my heart's heart. My heart's heart is telling not only the story of getting out of debt and being financially free, but also telling people how that I was set emotionally free. And I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I had an eating disorder, which led to heroin addiction. And I was radically saved at 19. And just my entire life changed from that moment on. And so I want to continue to give hope in all the areas where we all need to be set free, whether it be addiction or poverty. And so I loved that I was able to kind of combine this message of selling vintage furniture, especially starting out being finding stuff that was discarded on the side of the road, which is a metaphor for the human condition. Sometimes we feel discarded, like undervalued and we don't have our significance and our purpose. And it just takes one person to
Yeah.
go in and pick that thing up and say, you know what, you do have value. And so I love that combining message. And so as I've kind of leaned more into that part of my life, I have stopped going out as much, which has definitely made the financial strain on my family a little bit more. And so my husband right now, and he was kind of, we were both kind of at a place where we felt like he needed to go out and get a job, not just to help our family financially, but there's only so much that a dad wants to sit and do. And, and the kids were, driving everybody nuts. And so we, shifted him. So last week, he started his job back in the IT world, which is super exciting for him. And it just felt like such a sweet era because we went through the pandemic. So it's been 4 years that we were home completely as a family together. And it was just such a beautiful time. And so now I'll continue this coming year, I'll continue homeschooling my children or doing charter online or something like that.
Yeah.
So we can have a little bit of structure in our life. But for the most part, I go into my garage in the morning, I, have my coffee, go in my garage, maybe clean up a piece of vintage furniture, create some online content, have a podcast, which I do have a vintage reselling podcast that I've just kind of reignited from when I did it back in the day, and go work out and come home and maybe spend some time scrolling my phone. My kids are playing internet, and then trying to have some semblance of order with meals and kids, and but they're all going all different directions because they're teenagers, they have jobs, so sometimes I spend part of my day taking them to Target or something like that. So just, I mean, to me, it feels like a normal day. It's just all these, instead of baking bread, I'm, making reels.
Yeah, that's that's amazing. And what a really empowering story and message. And I'm so glad that you are sharing that not only with my listeners, but with the broader community. I mean, you have this platform now, whether it's the podcast or Instagram, but this stage too. And I just think you hit the nail on the head, Elaine, with the idea that it takes one person to see the potential in that kind of brokenness and in that what some people might consider literally trash. And that is a strong metaphor between your heartfelt message and literal trash on the side of the road. Oh, it
Yeah.
just bless you. I will be praying for you because I know that that's a big message and something that should be shared, especially for
Yeah.
all of those people who just feel like they are at the bottom of the barrel and may never feel worthy. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely something that I'm striving for. I was on, 25 podcasts and or stages last year, and I hope to double that this year just to continue sharing my message of hope. And the one thing about pageantry is that when you have a crown and a sash, people somehow pay attention, even though it doesn't make me any more important or my message hasn't changed. But for some reason you know, that crown and sash really does bring, and that's the reason why I started it, because as somebody who was in roller derby and a heroin addict, like that was not like me, glitz, glam, and glitter. That was not kind of my genre. It was like vintage everything, and a little bit more boho. And so that's been an interesting journey for me, and it's super fun because it's just like a fun girls weekend, and you can put your false eyelashes on too, but it definitely has expanded that ability to continue to reach out and then also bring the community into the journey with me, because I have sponsors and people who, I get Botox or my hair done or something like that, and then I can promote their small business and their dream. And then I also have had the pleasure of connecting different small businesses so they can go forward and live their dreams together as well. So it's been such a just amazing opportunity, and God has used it in ways that I could have never dreamed that he would have used vintage furniture and pageantry.
Yeah, they don't really go hand in hand when you think
Yeah,
of.
no, I wouldn't normally think that.
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, you said something. I'm going to go back to it for a second, and we're not going to camp on here for long, but roller derby. That is so awesome. And wow, how paradoxical are those two things, right? Roller derby and pageantry. Those are just two
Yeah,
different.
definitely two different groups for sure.
Okay,
So
what was your roller derby name? Because I'm sure it wasn't Elaine.
No, it was Lady Hawk, which is kind of a nod to the, vintage film with, I think it was Michelle Pfeiffer, and the kind of she's the hawk by day and he's a wolf by night. And they like switch right at dawn, they see each other and it's for just a split moment. And it's just it was one of my favorite shows growing up. And so I was just like, that's definitely my name in roller derby. So.
Awesome. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Okay, let's focus for a minute on the finds that you do find. And sometimes for you, I'm sure some of your friends have always or have said, you always find the good stuff, or how do you see the potential? Like this just looks like a piece of rubbish on the side of the road. Um, how do you recognize the potential? Is it something that you can teach someone?
So I think it is something that you learn more that you do it. And then there's also a sense that you just have to have an eye for it. So my husband always asks me, what makes the difference between this couch and this couch? And I was like, well, that's mid-century modern and that's a knockoff, or that's just not in style right now. And he just couldn't, he's getting better. But it definitely doesn't come naturally. And I always just said, if it was in my grandmother's house, then that's what I'm going for. And then you also have to find pieces that speak to you, that like if you were stuck with it, would you be like, oh, I hate this piece of furniture? You don't want to you don't want to go there. And there definitely have been pieces that I picked up because I knew it would sell and not because I loved it. But much prefer the pieces that I love. And I think that that love transfers even on the, social media screen. And so when I'm, and so there's kind of a difference between things that I've found on the side of the road versus things that I go and source. So the things that I find on the side of the road, they have to meet some sort of quality expectation so that I'm not spending more time than it's worth restoring it and repairing it.
Yeah.
And I've gotten really picky because there's so many times that I'd pick up something on the side of the road and would need so much paint repair, like that was beyond my scope or that I even had time to do. And then I was stuck with all these project pieces stuck in the back of my I have a studio now, my studio. And at some point I had an entire, like, you sell they're car tents and they're bright orange. I called it my circus tent. And I had one on my driveway full of project stuff. And I finally was like, I'm so sick of this tent. It's awful looking. And so I think I just went in and just started either selling it for super cheap or giving it away for free or, donating it to other resellers because I just didn't have the time and effort to do that. Because you definitely have to think about your ROI on anything. Now, if you're keeping it for your home and it's something that you really want to invest that time in, that's different. But when you're selling it, you're looking for that kind of that quicker flip. When I'm going into the thrift store and I'm looking for pieces, I definitely am still looking for that kind of quality and construction. Most people don't, I mean, that's not true. Most things that are donated are and somewhat structurally have structural integrity. And
Right.
so then you're just deciding whether it's the price of it is justifies the price you're going to get for it. So, if it's a vintage mid-century dresser I find at the thrift store, but it's $200 and I'm going to sell it for 400, like I have to look at my budget and say, okay, do I have $200? Even and sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes is yeah, that's a quick flip for me. And so I'll invest $200 and get 400, 500, 600. And then sometimes I just don't have it in my budget to do that. So I can't do that. I prefer a flip that is, like I'm bad at math in there, but like 1,000% markup. So like if I buy it for $40 and sell it for 400, that's where I want to be. And
Right.
so that's why I focus on furniture rather than the small stuff, because the small stuff you're working just as hard to photograph and post that item, but not making near as much money. And then, of course, there's got it with glass, because a lot of the small stuff is glass. You've got to be careful. And then sometimes you're talking about shipping and that's just something that I just didn't want to get into. And I decided that pretty early on that I just wanted to focus on furniture.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a question for you that you don't know is coming, but I have a shop here too, and I do restore furniture, find it on the curb, find it Goodwill, all the things. And I sell it in my brick and mortar, but I've noticed, and I'm wondering if you do too, that recently there's not really as much of a market for furniture as there was.
Yeah,
I mean, even pre-pandemic, wow, I couldn't stock my store fast enough with furniture.
right.
It was I would get it in and I would take it out like the next day. Um,
Absolutely. You are not alone in that. I think every single reseller that I've talked to has felt that shift. I think right after the pandemic was just like the gold rush era. I mean, things that I can't sell for 200 were selling for 8, 900 back then.
yeah.
And I was importing things from Morocco and Turkey and it was just flying off the shelves. And I'm like sitting and I'm like, please take this from me. Just, I'm tired of looking at it. So
Yes.
I definitely think that you're not alone. And I think that part of the pandemic was just magical because people were stuck at home and
Yeah.
they were working from home and they were so sick of their own spaces that they wanted to, modernize them and redo them. And they had so much time on their hands, they definitely did. And then after the pandemic, people started shifting because there was jobs in different areas. The Austin job market was hot and people were flocking in from all over and New York, California, and they were just like throwing money because to them, this Texas housing was so cheap and they had so much extra money just to throw on furniture. And so now that the market has shifted, there's been a couple round of layoffs here in Austin with the Tesla and Dell that people are starting to kind of think about moving back or they're cutting back. And so I definitely think there's just not near as influx of people. So I think just people aren't needing it as much. But just like any business, that there's going to be ebbs and flows in the market. And even if you don't get in when it's the hottest market, you can still make money in this market. You just have to be very, very careful and, realize that if you do go into this full time, you're going to have to prepare for those leaner months. And that was one of the mistakes that me and my husband made in the November, December months is we realized that that Q4, which does really well for a lot of people, was not a good month for furniture. And
Yeah.
so we were like, oh my goodness, we are going to have to prepare next year a little bit better so that we have some ability to buy Christmas presents for our own kids.
Right. Right.
And so, and that meant for me taking on some social media consulting and doing things that I do because I have 20 years in graphic design and web design and social media and marketing. And so kind of shifting and using what I know from my business to help others grow their business during those leaner months. So I think I've heard that it's smart to have like 7 streams of income. So if you can find different ways to market yourself that kind of all, center around a central hub, that's probably a really smart business move. It does mean that you're always hustling, and small business ownership is definitely not for everybody, and it could be heart-wrenching. And, and I mean, and honestly, that's why part of the reason why my husband went back to work, because I was just like, as a wife, and as a mom, I can't carry this financial burden alone. Like I can't compartmentalize it like I think my husband can. For me, if I wasn't doing good financially and my kids were like asking me for things, I felt like, oh my, I'm just like, I suck as a mom. Like I'm failed. I'm a loser. And it became a lot more complex. And so at some point last year, I was just like, babe, I don't want to shoulder this anymore. And he was totally fine with that. Like he was just supporting my dream because he had worked for for our family for so many years. And and I was done homeschooling for the time. I was like, I need a break. So he, it worked out really good, but now it's going back to the way that I think probably better for our family, and which is very humbling experience because you feel like, well, I've failed, but I have to look at my numbers. And yes, I'm not bringing in I think one of my best months was $15,000. Maybe I'm not bringing in $15,000 a month anymore, but I'm still turning a profit.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember that, like, if your business at the end of the year, after expenses and taxes and all that, still makes $45,000, $50,000, $60,000, you're doing
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
But when you're used to making $100,000, it's like, man, it doesn't feel so good. So
Right.
I think
Right.
it's just making sure that we take a moment, even in the leaner times, to pat ourselves on the back and remember that we're doing a really good job. We're doing real, and it's outside of just making money. I'm keeping history out of the landfill. I'm teaching other people how to make money on the side.
Yeah.
And so just have to be really kind to ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think too, when you focus on the data, the metrics that come in, whether it's just how many people did I help with that social media growth, or how many people did I reach in the podcast, or how much money did I make? That data is really informative, and it is not drama, right? We don't do well with the drama, but we can be mindful when there's the data-driven stuff.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so let's say we find a piece on the side of the road. What are some steps that you might take to determine, I mean, we know that we want it to be kind of a quick return. If you're keeping it, you can invest a little bit more time and energy into it. But what would you suggest for modifying it? What are some things that you look for in order to determine, do I stain it? Do I leave it? Do I just give it
Right.
a good dusting?
Yeah, so I do offer a resellers course for $7 where I kind of go really into all of this. But if I were brand new and I were going out on the road, knowing what I know, I would look for things that didn't require a lot of work. I like to keep things as close and authentic as possible, but I know that's not always the case. So say like I found a tall boy dresser that, the kid had colored on, and maybe some nail polishes on the top and some of the veneers, the back of the veneers maybe, and the white legs are a little wobbly. And I decided, I'm gonna go ahead and pick this up. I would, number one, magic eraser that stuff off, the kids stuff off, try to, gently chip off any nail polish. And then if it were, you know, if that was enough, I would go over it with Howard's Restore Finish and make sure that, nothing was, screwing everything that was wobbly, and then stage it on a white wall with the plant next to it and post it on Facebook Marketplace. If there was something more, like if I had to sand it down, I would probably it go back and forth, because sanding it down all the way to the way really good refinisher, which I just did a podcast with somebody who does excellent refinishing. I'm a duct tape, staple gun, Velcro type of gal. So I probably would sand it down enough that I would just paint it. I'd find some sort of oops paint over it, and maybe sand it one more time, paint over it again, do a light sanding. They have these like spongy Dollar Tree sanding pads that I like to use just to do a light sanding, paint it again, and then I would just seal it with a lacquer or a polyurethane, just and put some cute little handles. There's a place near me called Drop Bin or Bin Drop, and it's Amazon returns, and you can open up the box and get, handles, little gold handles, for $3 where they were, $20 per handle or some kind of craziness on Amazon. And so just put new handles on it and then stage it like that. That would probably be what I would do and how I'd go about it. I do furniture restaining and sanding. And so if you're doing that, you definitely want to use a furniture conditioner after you've sanded it down, because if you apply the stain on it without doing that, it can get a little blotchy and not really the type of
Finish.
color that you want.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Do you have any duds that you've picked up over the years?
Oh, I am definitely sure of things that I have picked up that I was like, what was I thinking? I can't off the top of my head think about any like duds, but I did pick up this one beautiful, like it wasn't 12 foot, because I think my table is 12 foot, because I actually thought about keeping it because it was so beautiful. But it was like 8-foot table, and it had 6 high back chairs. And at the very beginning, I I knew the chairs needed to be recovered, but the table was fine. And usually tables and chairs sell better separately. I don't know why people, because people like to mix and match, and they like want a thick, chunky table, but they don't want thick, chunky chairs, or that they want, more modern chairs. And so they like to mix and match. So I sold the table. I bought the whole set for 200, sold the table maybe for 900 pretty quickly. And those stupid chairs sat in the back of my garage for 2 years. And
Oh,
what had happened is I bought some vintage fabric, and I'd done the back, and I ran out. It's
oh no.
I was like 2 bottom chairs short. I was like, oh, this sucks. So I just took them back. I was like, I'm not doing it. And finally, I just said, you know what? Done is better than perfect. And bought some, because it was like the vintage fabric was like a black, kind of a blue black denim with like little dots. And so I just went ahead and bought a black denim that might have had a tiny bit of blue, but it wasn't super, it was more black than blue. And just was like, I'm going to pair it together. And the lighting, you could kind of tell it was off, but you're, when the chair is pushed under, you're not seeing it. And so I actually had a repeat buyer like immediately messaged me. I was like, I have to have those. And they sold for $500, I think. I think I had them listed for 650, and she was just like 500. And I was
Yes,
so, I mean, it
yes.
was a day. I was like, I want to see them gone. I am so sick of them. Please just
Yeah.
take them. And so
Yeah,
I
please
delivered
deliver
them, and
this.
they look so fabulous. And I don't know why I was putting so much pressure on myself to find the perfect fabric for it, and just instead of just getting it out, doing it. So that's definitely one that is stuck out to me.
Oh, how about any favorites?
Oh,
Or
there's
any,
been,
I bet you found some things over the years that you're like, ooh, I like this so much that I can't get rid of it. It's now in my home. Anything like that?
yeah, definitely. So there is a beautiful Moroccan screen that is in my downstairs dining room, that it's actually hiding. I have like all this flooring because I redone my floors, and I still have to do a little bit. So it's hiding all this flooring. It's like stuck in it. I'm like, oh, I like it in there. But I love that piece. There's also been some Danish pieces that I brought in that my husband was like, we need that. You can't get rid of it. And then just recently I sold it. And my husband's like, I can't believe you sold my favorite piece. And I was like, but it wasn't really functional for us.
Yeah.
So it was near our kitchen, and he wanted to put spices in the back of it. And so the top of it, we didn't have books or anything. And it had like a kind of a bigger space for a TV, but that wasn't our TV room. I was like, babe, like, we're a big family. Like, everything has to be functional in this house. Like, beautiful, absolutely, but it also has to be functional.
Right.
So so it's fine now. But that there has been so many pieces that I've kept. And that's the beauty of reselling. You
Yeah.
can keep it for a year,
Yeah.
6 months, and then when you're like, this doesn't really work for us anymore, then you just get rid of it.
Yep, exactly. And it's a quick little refresh. And there are times too when I, have at the shop, like if I love a piece, but I'm wanting it out of my home, I'll just up the price just a teeny tiny bit because if they want it, they can pay for it, but it doesn't make me feel so bad if I,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we got top dollar for the piece because
yeah,
I was just like, if we're gonna sell it, it's gonna get us a lot of money. And
exactly.
it went like in a day for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Oh, crazy. Okay, well, if any of the mamas who are listening are thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds like I might be able to do this, maybe make a couple hundred extra dollars a month, maybe just pay the grocery bills each month. How would you, I know you have the course and we will link that in the show notes, but are there any quick tips that you can leave them today just to give them a little bit more inspiration to get started?
I will just leave them with the story is that I know what it's like to be so broke. And you talked about buying the groceries. As somebody who was on Medicaid and food stamps and WIC, and not being able to afford your groceries. In fact, I went one time to the grocery store and went on the wrong day, because if you go on the wrong day, your benefits aren't loaded. And she looked at me, the cashier looked at me, and she goes, don't you and your husband have jobs? I was like, girl, we have 2 college degrees. Like, it's not about laziness. We were hustling our butts off, but we just had a big family, and we, it just was what it was. And my husband was working in a nonprofit, which didn't help.
Yeah.
And so when I started just picking up anything, I mean, anything, or selling things around your house, you don't even have to go out of your house, because a lot of us have babies that are napping still. This is something that you can, or, take your baby to the Goodwill and go through the aisles and just pick up something that is a couple bucks and sell it for 10, and then take that $10 and sell something for 100, then take that, and it feeds into each other. But I cannot tell you the absolute pride it is to slap down $250 and pay for your own groceries after years and years of getting government assistance.
Yeah.
So if anything, if I could inspire any mom, it would just be like, it feels good. It
Yeah.
feels good to be able to afford your own way. It feels good to be able to contribute to your family. And I would just say, go for it.
Ah, I love it. I love it. We're going to leave it there because I think that is so incredibly true. And especially for, some of those moms who they probably have the degree, they probably have, whether they can afford it or not, but, they are in this place, and this was me, of having a career, but then you stay home with the babies and you're kind of sacrificing a little bit of yourself, and you just want to contribute. You want to help out as much as you can. And this is a great way to do that, whether it's because you need to or because you want to. And what
Absolutely.
inspiration. Awesome. Elaine, it has been such a joy chatting with you. Where can my mamas connect with you? Where can they learn more? Where can they support you in your pageantry, in the message you're wanting to share with the world? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So if you are looking to support pageantry, or you have a small business that you're looking to support, I have an entire sponsorship package. And like I said, I have 20 years of all sorts of communication, marketing, advertising that I offer in exchange for sponsorship. That is found on Elaine Mingus Official on Instagram, or elainemingus.com. And then for vintage furniture, it's Curb, like the side of the road, Vulture, like the big ugly bird, .com, curbvulture.com, or curbvulture on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was such a joy having you on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, Elaine's story was just incredibly inspiring. And we chatted before and after the recording, so I got to learn a little bit more about her story that she didn't necessarily share here. But she's an open book, and this message that going from broken to redeemed, in human nature, but also broken to redeemed in this idea of restoring furniture, finding furniture, saving it from the landfills. There is a parallel there, and I invite you to go and check her out a little bit. Learn a little bit more about her story and the mission that she's on. It's a beautiful one, and we might not all aspire to be furniture flippers, but I think we all inspire to be better humans, and knowing that there is beauty in the broken when we look at people who might be a little bit unloved or might feel a little unworthy, there's beauty there. So if you don't get anything else out of today, I encourage you to go and spread just a little bit of love to those who need it. All right. And if you are inspired by Elaine's furniture flipping, and if you do think, gosh, I think I might be able to do that, $7 is not a bad investment. So I'm going to link that in the show notes so you can listen to take her course and learn all of the tips that she has laid out for you in order to get set up for success. All right, friend, until next time, I'll see you soon. Hey, real quick before you go, if you learned something new or found value in today's podcast, would you head over to iTunes to Fig and Farm at Home and leave a review and subscribe to the show? That would be awesome. And if you'd like to connect with my community of mamas who are learning to be intentional storytellers within their own homes, join us at bit.ly/design101 group. There's always more room at the table. See you soon.